Oskar Schindler in 22 minutes. Imagine a world torn apart by war, where one man stands against the tide of hatred. Amidst the chaos of Nazi-ruled Europe, Schindler's factories became havens, his list, a beacon of hope. His actions, driven by courage and compassion, changed the course of history for hundreds. The legacy of Oskar Schindler lives on, not just in history books, but in the heartbeats of those he saved. Their stories, a living tribute to a man who chose humanity over hatred, life over destruction. Your engagement helps us bring more such stories to light. Remember, every like honors the legacy of heroes like Schindler, and every subscription ensures that the lessons of the past continue to enlighten our future. Born on April 28, 1908, in Svitavy, Moravia, part of the then Austro-Hungarian Empire, Schindler's early life in the Sudetenland was marked by cultural ties with Germany. Despite a troubled childhood marred by his father's alcoholism and infidelity, Schindler pursued his education, albeit indifferently. The First World War and the subsequent birth of Czechoslovakia brought profound changes to his homeland, setting the stage for his tumultuous journey ahead. Known among peers as Schindler the Crook, following a youthful indiscretion, he faced family scandals, including accusations of embezzlement against his father. These events shaped his early adulthood, leading him to gain skills in machinery, chauffeuring, and heater maintenance. Joining the family business marked his transition into adulthood, just as Europe edged closer to another great conflict. Schindler's life was further intertwined with the course of history when he married in 1927, a union that coincided with the turbulent developments of 20th century Europe. His transformation from an ambitious businessman to a savior amidst the Holocaust underscores the unpredictability and complexity of human nature, especially in times where moral choices could mean life or death for others. In the village of Ster-Malitan, 40 kilometers from Kvitov, lived Emily Pelzel, affectionately known as Millie. Born into a prosperous farming family, her life starkly contrasted with the tumultuous Schindler household. Oskar Schindler first met Emily in 1924 under the guise of a business proposition for her family. His frequent visits, initially for discussions on agricultural machinery, were a cover for his growing affection for Emily. This blossoming romance led to their marriage on March 6, 1928. However, the Schindler marriage was not without its challenges. Living in the Schindler family home, their early marital bliss was often disrupted by Oskar's father's drunken misbehavior. The couple's journey through the subsequent decades was marked by both joy and strife. Oskar's frivolous ambition to become a race car driver led to the squandering of Emily's substantial dowry, a decision that strained their finances and marriage. Seeking financial stability, Oskar left his father's business for a job at the Moravian Electric Company in Brno, only to later establish a racing school. His conscription into the Czechoslovak army offered a brief interlude of stability. Following his military service, he returned to Moravian Electric, but the worsening economic conditions of the 1930s led to the company's downfall. Emily, understandably, grew disillusioned with Oskar's wastefulness and his increasing alcoholism, which mirrored his father's. This period was punctuated by Oskar's multiple arrests for public drunkenness and a short stint in jail. A turning point came when Oskar secured a job at the Jaroslav Cimek Bank in Prague, offering a brief respite from their troubles. Yet, Oskar soon relapsed into old habits, engaging in an affair with Aurelie Schlegel, a childhood friend and former secretary to his father. This affair resulted in the birth of 2 children, Emily and Oskar Jr. Despite Oskar's infidelity and irresponsibility, Emily remained steadfast in her belief in his innate goodness and his propensity to help others. Her enduring affection and tolerance for his shortcomings underscored the complex dynamics of their relationship. As the 1930s progressed, Oskar's immaturity, deceit, and financial recklessness cast a shadow over their marriage, foreshadowing the tumultuous times that lay ahead. In the early 1930s, Oskar Schindler was embroiled in personal strife, but the world around him was undergoing significant changes, especially in nearby Germany. The end of the First World War had seen the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II and the fall of the German Empire, giving rise to the Weimar Republic. This period was tumultuous, with Berlin and Munich witnessing conflicts between socialists, communists, and right-wing nationalists. Amid this unrest, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis, led by Adolf Hitler, began to gain prominence. Their ideology was rooted in resentment over Germany's losses in World War I and fueled by anti-Semitic and anti-communist conspiracies. The Nazis' initial attempt to seize power in Bavaria in 1923 failed, and they remained a fringe group until the economic devastation wrought by the 1929 Wall Street crash. The ensuing Great Depression severely impacted Germany, and the Nazis' message resonated with many disillusioned citizens. By 1930, they had become a significant political force and, by 1932, the largest party. Hitler's ascension to Chancellor in January 1933 marked the beginning of a dictatorial regime under the Nazis. Schindler's political stance during this period was complex. He initially sympathized with the Communist Party after a trip to Berlin in 1931, but by 1935 had aligned with the Sudeten German Party, which sought to unite Sudetenland with Germany. This nationalist inclination, shared by many, overlooked the impending catastrophic impact of Nazi policies. Schindler's personal life during this period was marked by challenges and losses, including the death of his mother in 1935 and a deepening estrangement from his father, who had abandoned his ailing mother. This estrangement partially healed in 1941. His life was fraught with alcoholism and financial difficulties, which he later attributed as factors that drove him to collaborate with the Abwehr, the German military intelligence, in 1936. However, Emily Schindler, his wife, recounted a different story, suggesting that his involvement with the Abwehr began through an affair with a member of the agency in Krakow. During the Weimar Republic era, Abwehr, initially formed as an intelligence service, evolved under Nazi rule into a tool for foreign intelligence and destabilization of neighboring territories coveted by the Nazis. Oskar Schindler, leveraging his business connections and his position at the Jaroslav Cimek Bank in Prague, became intricately involved in Abwehr's operations. His role extended to espionage, focusing on crucial Czechoslovakian infrastructure like railways and military installations, drawing upon his experience from his time in the Czechoslovak army. Schindler's intelligence gathering was pivotal in the lead-up to a potential German invasion, either targeting Sudetenland or the entirety of Czechoslovakia. His activities also included documenting the internal conditions of Poland, foreboding the complex future relationship between Germany and Poland. Despite later downplaying his involvement with Abwehr as minor and driven by financial necessity, Schindler's arrest by the Czechoslovak government in 1938 for espionage suggested a more significant role. Parallel to Schindler's involvement with Abwehr, Nazi Germany was escalating its aggressive expansion. In defiance of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936. Hitler's long-held aspiration to annex Austria was realized in March 1938 with the Anschluss, as German troops occupied Austria without resistance. For Schindler, the annexation of Sudetenland was a turning point. His imprisonment for espionage ended as the Munich Agreement led to his release. Following his release in late 1938, Schindler found himself with a substantial sum of money, leading him to seek membership in the Nazi Party. Despite his active service in Abwehr and a history of public inebriation, his application was eventually accepted in spring 1939. By this time, Schindler and his wife Emily had moved to Ostrava, strategically located near the Czech-Polish border, an area soon to be engulfed in the tumult of World War II. With the annexation of the Sudetenland in 1938, Hitler's aggressive expansion continued unabated, leading to the full annexation of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. Despite diplomatic warnings from Britain and France, the Nazi invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, precipitated the outbreak of the Second World War. Schindler's activities during this tumultuous period were characterized by significant intelligence-gathering efforts, particularly concerning Poland. His move to Krakow in October 1939 placed him at the heart of the German occupation in Poland. There, he embarked on a new venture, not as a Nazi official or an Abwehr agent, but as a businessman exploiting the chaotic economic landscape of the occupied territory. By January 1940, Schindler had acquired a factory in Krakow with the aid of Jewish financiers looking to protect their assets. This venture, the German enamelware factory, initially employed a small number of Jewish workers, including Abraham Bankier, the factory's former owner. While Schindler's initial motivations were driven by economic interests and the benefits of employing Jewish workers, the ensuing war and the plight of his employees would profoundly influence his actions and legacy. Schindler's arrival in Poland coincided with a time when the Jewish population, numbering around 3.5 million, faced escalating persecution under Nazi rule. The anti-Semitic policies of the Nazis, which began tightening their grip on Germany's Jewish population since 1933, had intensified, culminating in the violent Kristallnacht in November 1938. With the Nazi invasion of Poland, the situation for Jews deteriorated drastically. In this context, Schindler's enamelware business thrived, partly due to his connections within the Nazi regime and contracts to supply the German army. This success marked a significant financial turnaround for Schindler, who had previously grappled with debt. As the Second World War progressed, the Nazis orchestrated the creation of ghettos in Poland, with the Warsaw Ghetto being one of the most harrowing, where nearly 400,000 Jews were confined to an area of less than 4 square kilometers. The ghettos masked a brutal reality of starvation, disease, and death under a veneer of normalcy. Amidst this backdrop of terror, the Nazis were also planning the systematic extermination of Jews, a plan that would profoundly impact Oskar Schindler and his actions. Despite being a member of the Nazi Party, Schindler's factories stood in stark contrast to the horrors outside. He increasingly employed Jewish workers, treating them with a respect and dignity absent in most of occupied Europe. He established facilities such as kitchens, dining areas, and a medical clinic within his factory, creating an oasis of relative safety for his Jewish employees. Schindler's affiliation with the Nazi Party was a matter of strategic convenience, not ideological alignment, and his convivial lifestyle served as a cover for his humanitarian efforts. As the Nazis initiated their final solution in 1942, aiming to exterminate the Jewish population, Schindler's efforts to protect his workers intensified. He used his influence, resourcefulness, and sometimes luck to shield them from the horrors of the Holocaust. His factories became sanctuaries in a landscape of unimaginable terror. Schindler's direct encounter with the Holocaust's brutality began not at the infamous death camps, but at Kraków-Płazow, a concentration camp near Krakow. Initially a small detention center, it expanded to hold over 10,000 prisoners, peaking at around 20,000. Kraków-Płazow was essentially a prelude to death, with inmates subjected to brutal forced labor and inhumane conditions, often before being transported to Auschwitz or similar extermination camps. In the midst of the Second World War, Oskar Schindler found himself playing a critical and unexpected role in the face of the Holocaust's horrors. With labor shortages due to the war, the Nazi regime offered him workers from the Kraków-Płazow concentration camp for his factories. Accepting this offer, Schindler embarked on a mission to save as many lives as he could, a task that seemed almost inconsequential amidst the overwhelming cruelty of the time. The situation was further complicated by the presence of Amon Goeth, the notoriously sadistic commandant of Kraków-Płazow. Goeth's casual brutality made the camp a daily scene of terror and death. Schindler's resolve to make a difference was solidified during the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto in 1942 and 1943, a brutal event that underscored the sheer inhumanity of the Nazi regime. As the ghetto was being liquidated, Schindler used his factories as a refuge. He employed Jews from Kraków-Płazow, manipulating paperwork to list unskilled individuals as essential workers to save them from being sent to death camps. This act of defiance wasn't without risk. The Gestapo arrested and interrogated Schindler several times between 1942 and 1944 for these irregularities and his evident favoritism towards his Jewish workers. In 1943, Schindler even traveled to Budapest to meet with leaders of the Hungarian Jewish community, providing them with vital information about the situation in Poland. This effort likely saved many lives when the Nazis later invaded Hungary in 1944. Financially, Schindler's situation deteriorated by 1943. The wealth he had amassed from his contracts with the German army was now being used to procure essential supplies for his Jewish workers. The official rations provided by the regime were grossly inadequate, and Schindler had to cover the shortfall to ensure the survival of his workers. Each day, became a struggle against time, hatred, and the pervasive darkness of the Holocaust as Schindler fought to maintain a semblance of humanity in an increasingly inhumane world. His efforts, though fraught with personal and financial risk, underscored a profound commitment to saving lives, eventually leading to the rescue of over 1,000 Jews from certain death. The global context of Schindler's actions was marked by significant shifts during World War II. The initial success of Hitler's 1941 campaign against the Soviet Union was met with formidable resistance, leading to a turning point in 1942 with defeats in North Africa and the significant Russian victory at Stalingrad. By 1943, the Allies were steadily pushing back the German forces. In 1944, the situation intensified with the opening of the Western Front by the US and Britain, which led to the liberation of key cities in France and signaled the impending downfall of the Third Reich. The advancing Russian forces brought both a threat and a glimmer of hope for the Jews in Schindler's care. However, as the Nazis began evacuating and dismantling camps in Poland, Schindler faced the risk of losing his Jewish workforce. In response, Schindler made a critical decision to relocate his operations to Brunlitz in the Czech region, along with hundreds of his Jewish workers. This move led to the creation of the now famous Schindler's List, which included approximately 1,200 Jews who were spared from the horrors of the Krakow-Płaszów camp. Yet, this transition was not without its challenges. During the evacuation from Krakow-Płaszów in late 1944, many of Schindler's workers were mistakenly sent to Grosshausen and Auschwitz. Upon realizing this error, Schindler acted swiftly, successfully negotiating the release of most from Grosshausen. Rescuing the 300 women sent to Auschwitz was a more formidable task, requiring substantial bribes. Schindler's efforts led to the extraordinary and rare instance of hundreds of Jews leaving Auschwitz alive for a destination other than another concentration camp. In the final stages of World War II, Oskar Schindler and his wife Emily continued their efforts to protect Jewish workers at their Brunlitz factory. Despite the difficult circumstances, including the harsh winter of 1945 and the dwindling resources of the war's end, they managed to transfer 120 Jewish prisoners from the Golizov subcamp of Auschwitz to Brunlitz. Tragically, 13 of these individuals perished during the journey, but Schindler persisted in his humanitarian mission. Schindler's moral compass was unyielding during the darkest times of Nazi rule. A poignant example of this was his response to a Nazi commander's order to burn the bodies of deceased prisoners. Defying this barbarity, Schindler ensured that these individuals were given proper Jewish burials near a Catholic cemetery, upholding human dignity in the face of profound cruelty. The 107 survivors who reached Brunlitz were cared for and gradually nursed back to health. As the war drew to a close with the fall of Hitler in April 1945 and the subsequent capitulation of the Nazi regime, Schindler and Emily moved westward, eventually finding refuge in the US-occupied zone in Bavaria. Despite his association with the Nazi Party and his past actions, Schindler was spared prosecution due to his efforts to save Jewish lives during the Holocaust. The post-war period, however, proved challenging for Schindler. Financially depleted from spending his fortune to protect Jews, his entrepreneurial ventures in Germany post-war were unsuccessful. Additionally, his health began to deteriorate, partly due to his long-standing issue with alcohol. Yet, the bonds he formed during the war years remained strong. Many of those he saved, now residing in Israel and other parts of the world, reciprocated the kindness he had shown them, providing him with support and ensuring his survival in the years following the war. In the late 1940s, Oskar Schindler, along with his wife Emily, sought a new beginning in Argentina, a country with significant German and Jewish communities. There, Schindler attempted to reinvent himself as a farmer, first with chicken farming and then venturing into what he believed was the fur industry using otters. Unfortunately, the supposed otters turned out to be nutrias, a South American rodent, and this venture, like others, led to mounting debts. During these challenging times, the Schindlers were sustained largely by the financial support from the Jewish people Oskar had saved during the war. The strain of failed business endeavors and Schindler's personal demons took a toll on his marriage. Emily, who had stood by him through various hardships, reached a breaking point during their time in Argentina. When Schindler returned to Germany in 1957, leaving Emily behind, it marked the end of their shared journey through life's storms. Back in Europe, Schindler's struggles continued. His business efforts failed, leading to bankruptcy in 1963. There was a brief moment of hope when a film project about his life, to be directed by Austrian director Fritz Lang, was proposed, but this too fell through. Schindler's financial situation remained precarious, and he faced health issues, including liver problems, which ultimately led to his death in 1974 at the age of 66. Despite his personal challenges, Schindler's heroic actions during the Holocaust began to receive recognition. In 1962, a carob tree was planted in his honor at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, acknowledging his efforts to save Jewish lives. The West German government awarded him the Order of Merit in 1966. Posthumously, Schindler and Emily were honored as Righteous Among the Nations in 1993. The same year, Steven Spielberg's film Schindler's List was released, bringing their story to a global audience. Oskar Schindler's life was a journey of transformation. From his early years marked by indiscretion and an affiliation with the Nazi Party, to the profound change he underwent in Poland, where he dedicated himself to saving Jewish lives, his story is a powerful reminder of the capacity for change and the impact of moral courage. His legacy, though tinged with personal struggles, is forever etched in the lives of those he saved and in the broader narrative of human resilience and compassion. If you're moved by this story of courage against all odds, please click like, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below.